This is such a beautiful poem, and I'm really looking forward to going through it with you. It's all about the power of memory, and the power of music and how that can evoke memories in us and give us a nostalgia for our childhood. And that is really embodied in the title of Piano. It doesn't have that meaning when you haven't yet read the poem, but it's sort of music is the trigger for all of this. And so the title, being a musical instrument, it is a key aspect of the memory that our speaker is going to have. When the poem opens, we've got this image. This is where the speaker is in the present. Softly in the dusk, a woman is singing to me. So if we think about the atmosphere that's immediately created there, you've got the sibilance there in softly in the dusk, a woman is singing to me. Dusk connoting quite a sort of subdued, peaceful time as the day shifts into night. Obviously softly denoting gentleness. It's all very warm and intimate. But there is also something quite detached in just calling her a woman as well. So it's slightly more impersonal. And this soft, quite intimate moment triggers in our speaker a soft, intimate memory, taking me back down the vista of years. Now, what's interesting about this metaphor, if we think about the taking me, first of all, it connotes the power of music, and it also suggests at the lack of control of our speaker. All right, whether they want to or not, this memory is going to be triggered for them. But they still seem to feel quite happy about that, because we have this description of the vista of years. Now, a vista is a large, beautiful scene. So a metaphor of a vista of years is almost like is being taken back across many large memories. And it creates, if we think about the power of memory, it creates the feeling of a journey. And that's important because our poet is trying to recreate that sensation of remembering something. So there's a physicality to it, which is reinforced by the fact that when he's looking back at the memory, he's seeing a child and a mother. So the indefinite articles of a child, a mother, mean that the speaker feels quite detached from it all. He is someone who has gone down memory lane, has gone on this journey and is looking back on it, but he's not part of it anymore. So on the one hand, journey makes it feel like memories are something where they're so strong, it's like you're physically back there. But then on the other hand, you're not actually back there because it's just a memory. So there's still this detachment. So the poet is simultaneously exploring the power of memory and the limitation of memory. And if we look at this image of this memory, a child sitting under the piano in the boom of the tingling strings and pressing the small poised feet of a mother who smiles as she sings. There's so much to say about this imagery. So the first thing I want to talk about is the sitting under the piano, creating a feeling of being very sheltered and protected. Then the boom of the tingling strings. I think that we could see this is onomatopoeia. Fun for you there. You write the note onomatopoeia before I do. Let's see if I'm going to spell it correctly. And are you going to spell it correctly? Onomatopoeia. So we've got a juxtaposition of onomatopoeia here because there's the boom of the tingling strings. And I think that speaks to the power of music in the sense of how music has this ability to be both incredibly strong and yet also incredibly gentle, sometimes at the very same time. And it's that onomatopoeia is reflecting that. You've also got with the verb pressing. So the child is pressing on the feet of the mother as she sings. So there's a connection there, a physical connection between them. This child is trying to be part of this moment. And the connection he has is with a mother who really seems to be lovely. And so you've got poised has connotations of like gracefulness, smiling and singing, connotations of warmth, connotations of joy. It's a really safe, secure, happy memory for our speaker. So that then means when we go to the next stanza, there's a little bit of a conflict here, because he says, in spite of myself, the insidious mastery of song betrays me back. This man does not want to go to this memory. Now, the stanza beginning with that phrase, in spite of myself, it does fit with the metaphor earlier of like him not having any control. So again, speaking to the power of memory, he doesn't have any control over his own memories and what he remembers and how it makes him feel. But there's also bitterness, slight perhaps like discomfort or tone of anger maybe, with insidious, suggesting that music has almost cruelly manipulated him. And the betrays me back, that personification really creates a tone of, I would say, almost anger, as if this is something that the speaker does not want and it's all against his will. Which, given the really lovely image of the previous stanza, raises questions to the reader of like, why? Why does he so badly not want to go back? And of course this stanza reveals a bit of that to us, because till the heart of me weeps. This personification, if we think about the heart, it's the most intimate part of you, it's the deepest part of your emotions. And so for that part of him to be weeping, which of course denotes great sadness, it shows the really profound emotional impact that this memory has had on him. And this line really kills me. The heart of me weeps to belong. I think that verb of to belong creates such a tone of longing and nostalgia and a sort of great sadness of missing this past. And we get another really lovely image from the memory that helps explain why he's feeling this way. So it says, to the old Sunday evenings at home, with winter outside and hymns in the cozy parlour, the tinkling piano our guide. There's a lot going on in this image, but for sure there's more feelings of safety and security. And that's created partly by the contrast between the winter outside and the cozy parlour. So like he's protected inside the house compared to the harsher weather outside. But also the feeling of routine, with Sunday and hymns alluding to, you know, a regular practice of religion and faith, plural of evenings. There's this feeling of like habit, a cozy, warm routine going on here, and the safety and security that routine brings us. It's really interesting the way that D.H. Lawrence plays with sound, and of course he's going to play with sound in a lot in a poem all about, you know, the power of music and its ability to evoke memory, because you've again got that tinkling and that onomatopoeia with its very gentle image, and yet that's in the same stanza as the alliteration in betrays me back, and that plosive alliteration creating that real bitterness. And I think the reason you have all of this within the same stanza is it's about showing the pain is coming from how pleasant the memories are, and the pain for him is in the missing of it. The pain is in missing the past. So it's quite sentimental. And even though he didn't want to be taken back, once he has been taken back, it can't help but shape the way he feels about the present. So he says, so now it is vain for the singer to burst into clamour with the great black piano appassionato. Again, he's playing with sound here to create a really actually jarring image, an unpleasant use of sound. So you've got burst and clamour that both have connotations of forceful harshness. You've also got the plosives in black, piano and appassionato that again add to that, physically create the sound of that harshness. And appassionato is a music term for something that has a very passionate, strong emotional quality. It contrasts with the very soft, gentle image of his memory. This is perhaps very unsubtle and obvious. Similarly, another way they contrast is that vain for the singer versus the hymns in his memory. That religious simplicity, wholesomeness, purity, compared to vain being, you know, a sin, essentially, almost the sinful over the topness of the singer back in the present. If we think about our power of memory, what's happened here is that the past, the memories of the past have made the present seem not as good. And in a sense, that is the power of nostalgia, right? That old saying of rose-tinted spectacles, and how we can think things were so much better in the past than they actually were. There's also perhaps an element of him romanticizing the past as well, which power of memories, because we aren't there, we're looking back on it, we have the ability to do that. We can just remember the really lovely aspects to it. He says, instead, the glamour of childish days is upon me. Now, it's important to note that glamour has a very different meaning here than it does in the modern sense. We're not talking like lights, camera, action. The archaic meaning of glamour is magical and enchanting. That, of course, fits with what I've just been saying about the romanticizing of his past, romanticizing his childhood in comparison to the sort of unsubtle, unpleasant present. Which, of course, if you think about how he described the present in the very opening line, the whole reason this memory got triggered for him is actually the similarity in the softness and the gentleness for him. So again, this isn't necessarily this view he now has of bursting into clamor with the great black piano appassionato isn't necessarily a fair reflection of what's actually happening in the room. It just shows that power of nostalgia for the past and how it can change the way we view things. And he has these two metaphors that both create very similar effects. So first of all, my manhood is cast down. He is not talking about that manhood. He's just talking about like his masculinity, his adultness, and instead he weeps like a child. Both of these symbolize a regression in our speaker, a returning to who he was before, and not in necessarily a positive way, in sort of a, because it's about crying, it's about a vulnerability and emotional weakness in returning to who he was. And it also shows again that power of memory, because it's like he has literally been taken back to being a child again. So showing how the memory has changed him. Obviously it hasn't literally changed him because he's not literally a child, but metaphorically it has changed him. I also need to talk about the fact that his manhood is cast down in the flood of remembrance. More on the power of memory. Flood with its connotations of being all-consuming, of being overwhelming, coming out of nowhere, being very sudden, all reflects that he did not anticipate how much of an impact this memory was going to have on him, and it has had a huge impact on him. Final thing I want to talk about is just thinking about the structure of this poem as a whole. So the poem is separated into quatrains, that means 4-line stanzas, and it has a regular rhyme scheme of rhyming couplets. It can also be called a lyric poem, which is a poem that is quite short, that has a regular rhyme and explores sort of powerful emotions. And all of this is reflecting the musicality to this poem, which in turn is, again, it's about the power of music and also arguably the power of memory, because there is a music to the way he is talking about the memory, just because the memory of the music, the power of the music is so strong. It can't help but sort of affect the very fabric of the poem, the very structure of the poem. That being said, there is not a consistent rhythm in this poem. There are moments where it does different things, but it's not consistent. And I think that is part of that disconnect I was talking about before with the indefinite article of a child and a mother, in the sense that on the one hand, memories can be really powerful and we can be taken back and we can feel like that we're there. On the other hand, we're not there. And so there is ultimately still a detachment. And so the lack of a consistent rhythm, I think, is reflecting just that little bit of disconnect. It's also worth noting that the rhyme is very subtle because of the use of enjambment. So when you're reading something with enjambment, you don't heavy pause at the end of the line, which means you often, the rhymes sort of pass by very subtly. And we could say that's a reflection of the subtlety of music and like what he was saying before about that insidious mastery of song. It can kind of creep up on you and you don't necessarily obviously notice it's there. So pretty much everything you're talking about in this poem, every aspect of it, the language, the structure and the form, is all tied into that core idea of the power of music, the power of memory, the impact it can have on us even when we don't want it to, and that really melancholy, sentimental tone of I wish I could be back in that happier time and I'm really sad that I can't be.